than practical. Here comes the girl. Way more than merely factual. If you wanna know the secrets of a life that's free, listen to girls behaving metaphysically. Listen to girls behaving metaphysically.
Welcome to Girls Behaving Metaphysically. Your hosts are two girls who believe that life is awesome, that laughter heals, and that it's possible to find deep spiritual insights in everyday experience. Join Robin Rice and Sumaya Wood for this week's adventure.
Well, I'm ready for an adventure. How about you? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Welcome.
Welcome. I'm Sumaya Wood.
And I'm Robin Rice. And we are
Girls Behaving Metaphysically.
That we are. And it is our Friday today that is, we're going to talk about coming out of hibernation.
Yes.
And I'm going to
some might say winter ended a while ago. What are you talking about, Robin?
They might say that, and we will tell them shortly after we tell them to make sure and like this and hashtag where you're calling in from or where you're watching us from, and if whether you're seeing it live or on the replay, either way, just let us know.
Hey, and Carol's already jumped in. Hello, Carol. Good to see you. Glad you could join us. Yes, so if you are catching us live, let us know you are here. And if you are catching us on the replay, just let us know you saw it. Just type in hashtag replay so we know you caught today's show. So it is May.
This is kind of like our mashup Friday, right? Where we're just gonna see what comes out. We're gonna talk about coming out of hibernation, what that means to us. And, just get a feel for what it means to you out there and what's going on in your lives.
Yeah. And so how can we be coming out of hibernation? Winter ended like a month and a half, almost 2 months ago. What are you talking about?
Well, I will tell you exactly what I'm talking about. You are very anxious to get to that topic. I think before we do that, we should introduce our guest.
Yes.
So that he can put his spin on it. So today we have joining us one that is not a stranger to Girls Behaving Metaphysically. He likes to play along with us Girls Behaving Metaphysically all the time. He is kind of our resident theologian because he's got those letters before his name, and he's kind of, well, to me, he's just an all-around good guy. But
I would have to agree.
Yep. See, there you go. So
the girls are having a consensus.
We're two or more gathered, and I'm pretty sure that Carol would put a yep in the category to that as well.
Yes.
So without further ado, let's bring out Gil William Olmstead.
Yay, Gil! Woo!
Hey, everybody. How we doing?
Awesome. How are you?
Good. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Glad to have you.
Thank you for being fearless and stepping into a topic that you have no idea what it's about.
Mm-hmm. But you know what?
Maybe you do, and we don't.
Those are usually the shows that are the most interesting.
Right?
That is true.
Because it's unfiltered.
Yep.
Everyone hears our process of figuring it all out.
Yeah. I was listening to you talk about hibernation, and so I'm out here in my garage hanging out with my bicycles. I have one hanging up right here.
Yes.
This is my bike from 1982 or something here.
Wow.
And, putting it back together. And I have over here a bunch of tires. And I was thinking about coming out of hibernation because I've been getting much more onto my bikes and going places and doing things. And in that process, I've been upgrading them. And see, these 3 tires look kind of different. Yeah. I have one that looks almost brand new because it is brand new, except that it's 5-6 years old. And so now it's no good. I have one here that's a lot older than that, isn't too worn, but it's also too old. And I have one here that just fell apart on me and started to bulge. And the point is, when you come out of hibernation, there's some stuff to do sometimes.
Absolutely.
There's
Absolutely.
some repairs to be made, some updates to be made, some new possibilities to be entered into. So that's what I was thinking about with my wheel, my tires right here.
Nice.
There
Well,
you
so
go.
I'm
That's my
going to
pick.
share Carol's. She said, yay, all around good guy.
Thank
We
you,
agree
Carol.
wholeheartedly, Carol. So, hibernation. It's way
So-
past winter. What the heck?
Well, I think we should just start where we started, because when Samantha and I started talking about the topic, we were initially going to talk about joy and joyride and bringing joy into our life, and it led to our life and the collective life and where people are at, and like, we didn't want to just go, come on, time for joy, woohoo, let's go, without talking about where people are at and what's on their mind. And I know that, I've had a lot of clients and a lot of people in recent months talk about their fears and their concerns, and the weirdness of like having to wear a mask all the time, or forgetting your mask and having to go home and get your mask, or whatever's going on, but just how life is different. And I mean, life is different.
Yeah, and the lockdowns that we've had for the past over 12 months, like what, 14 months for some of us. And they're still going on. And, some states are opening, some countries are opening, some states are in the process thereof. Some have set dates further down the road for lockdowns to end. And then people are going back to work, right? After I was talking to a client today who said, her company is actually working through the process of what does back in the office look like, and for bringing everyone back in, and what does that mean. And I'm here visiting, or helping my dad out, and seeing all of his old friends that I've known since I was from birth to like 5 years old, so I've known them pretty much my entire life. And even with them, prior to the past 14 months, I wouldn't have thought twice of giving them a hug and a kiss, and just to say hello, as greeting them. And now I ask permission, right? And so, because not everybody, I don't know, and I don't want to invade somebody's space, where they are, depending on where they are mentally. And so there's a lot to think about as we come out of hibernation. And what does it mean, and what's normal, and can we go back to the way that we were on, say, February 1st of last year?
And do we want to?
And do we want to?
And I think what I'd like to say is that about this discussion, since we don't know where it's going, is it really doesn't matter what side of the thing you fall on in terms of politics, or right or wrong, or real or not real, or any of that. It's really just about, we've all shared a collective experience in that we've all been under this, what do you call it, gloom of COVID, and cloud of COVID, and we've had to abide by certain rules, and we've had to make our choices and listen, and we've had to be locked up and locked down, and and taking those precautions. So it's not about the politics of it. It's more just about the experience, and how do we emerge from that. And I think there's both, if you will, there's positives and negatives to it. So that's, I just wanted to say that.
Okay. So what are you seeing, Gil? What are you seeing in your experience with this coming out of hibernation?
Well, as you two were talking, I was just thinking about, I kept seeing the chrysalis and the butterfly And the fact that quite literally the worm turns to mush, and then the butterfly comes forth. And when the butterfly comes out, it is in no way looking for what it had before. It's now looking for what it has, what has always been within it that's now expressing, that's showing up.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of the beauty of where we are, that there are, there's no reason for everybody to go back to work in an office. And companies know that. They're saving millions and billions of dollars on offices right now. And I can't tell you how much real estate has been canceled in terms of construction, et cetera, in San Francisco, because big companies are like, oh, we're not going to actually go forward with that.
Yeah.
Because they don't need the space. Because the reality is, we don't have to do it the way we've always done it.
Absolutely.
So we can come out of this. That's right. We can make it what we want it to be, and we can create a world that actually does work better for people. So people we're not driving and polluting as much. We're not having to be away from family as much. All kinds of different things can become real positives. And so that's kind of what I'm hopeful about in this process.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because, the one client I was talking to about this very thing earlier today, we were talking about introverts and extroverts, and the extroverts that we both know are kind of clamoring to get back to the office, to be surrounded by people, because they love that that in-person, face-to-face interaction. And the introverts have loved the past 14 months because they get to stay home in their comfort zones. And so it's interesting how we've all had to stretch in very different ways as we've navigated not only the past 14 months, but as we think about navigating what's coming.
Yeah, and I think that the tendency is to assume, or to want to assume, we're going to go back to normal. Well, what is that? And was it good?
And was it ever normal?
And was it ever normal?
Or were we just conditioned to think,
Exactly.
Right. And so, I love that.
It's okay to make those introverts come in and wear themselves out every day, Yeah. And that's just how we do it. If you're not an extrovert, you're done for.
Yeah.
In a certain way. And that's not what this has done. I think has allowed everybody to show up, and also shown us how we do need to be in connection. How can we be in connection without, right now I can't touch you, but I'm here.
Right.
How can we be in connection without being right where people are? And also the value of being in connection and having a hug, and just standing next to someone while they laugh, while they cry, while they whatever, and them just knowing you're right there. I mean,
absolutely. And it's so interesting because it's not exactly the same as along the introvert extrovert kind of continuum, but there are those who are kind of heavy on the fear in this moment as we talk about coming out, because they're worried about health issues, they're worried about it's primarily the health issues of what does it mean if we all go back to being in such close proximity to everybody, and what does that mean for my health, even if I've been vaccinated, or if I haven't been vaccinated, or if I have been vaccinated and I'm around somebody that hasn't been vaccinated, what does that mean for me? And there's also I've seen, online, I've read about folks being in fear of, folks who have not been vaccinated being in fear of being around people who have been vaccinated, because they don't know what that means for them, and yada, yada, yada. And so, there's a lot of fear as well going, there's excitement, there's enthusiasm of kind of moving beyond the lockdowns and having a bit more freedom. And there's fear that comes along with that freedom.
Well, there's fear when we're living from that place of not knowing where our center is. Mm-hmm. And that's always the case. And what this has done, I think, is in some ways given people a new opportunity to realize how much they are living in what's happening around them, dictating who they are.
Right.
And being in that fear instead of who is emerging as you. I mean, we can't live in this world assuming that we are that we are at the whim of whatever else is going on. It's not so much that we're at the whim of it, but when we are in touch with what's real, then it changes everything around us. And the thing I realized recently is, fear is just the opposite of faith. It's the other end of the spectrum of faith. It is the belief in things that might be, could be, possibly be, versus the belief in some spiritual truth or some principle. And so you end up with two different results, but you're basically engaging in the same thing. So people who are fearful and really fearful are really good, actually, potentially, at being very faithful. Because they practice all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So we practice, when we've been in that fear place, we've practiced the idea of really latching onto something and knowing that's the way it is. But it's just a matter of aligning what we're attaching to.
Absolutely. Robin,
well, and that's the reason that during this time, spirituality has risen. Spiritual people are becoming more spiritual. There's more people attending spiritual gatherings, church, people that have, I read an article about, a woman who had left her job because she was committed to trying to be an actress. And then the pandemic hit and there's no there's no auditions, there's no shows, there's no nothing. Mm-hmm. And so she really wanted to explore her relationship with spirit, and so she went to a center, a church or whatever. And I mean, I think that it's, and I saw a thing about how the numbers have risen during this time, also because, I mean, obviously people are searching for answers, but also because it's been so easy to do during this time. Mm-hmm. You don't have to get up, you don't have to leave your house, you don't have to be worried about who you're going to meet, or if you're going to have to stand up when they say the new people, or what you're going to have to do, so you just can turn your TV on and hide behind the box,
and go to church from the comfort of your living room.
It's
in the comfort of your PJs.
And it begs the question of those groups, those spiritual groups, as to why it's, kind of like the offices, why we've made it so that it's really only the extroverts that we make comfortable. Why do we not, that's a sort of a block thing, but why do we not reach out into where people are? Why have we not done that until now?
Yeah. Well, it was a forcing function, right?
And it's the same thing with restaurants. Why did they never think of putting together family packs to go before? I mean, how many of those worked out pretty well? You get a great deal and a lot of food, and it was easy, and you said, I want a number one, and you got all the stuff you needed. And that just wasn't in the milieu of any of your, middle of the road restaurants. It was only for fast food.
And your answer is the typical answer. I think it's supply and demand, right? They didn't have to. Right. They didn't have to, because you could get up and bring your whole family and spend twice as much because you were going out for the evening. When business slowed down, they had to be creative to get you to want to come out of your house, even if it was just to pick up or to call Uber Eats or whatever it is that you did. But it was an extra step. I mean, we the people were already taking the extra step. So the company had to figure out how to get us there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And my concern for myself is to not get myself back into the trap of feeling like I have to do all those things. Because I've discovered that there's so much I can do from home and so many things like this that I can do and be fully connected with you. And literally I can do this from 2:15 to 3:45 or whatever the heck it is we're on total. And there's no drive time, there's no other time involved that I'm taking away from anything else. And it gives me that extra time to do other things. And it also, I don't have to go, if I want food at some point, I don't want to cook it. I don't always have to go out and do the whole thing. I can do something different. And I think it's the same with our spiritual growth. It's like, oh, I don't have to like jump in and be fully into whatever this church, this spiritual center, this Buddhist temple, whatever they're doing. I can kind of go in and sample it, see what's going on, and I can actually sample 3 or 4 on any given day.
Yeah, and be it opens up the question. I mean, I think there's a few different threads that I'm going to try to bring together that we've touched on so far, so we can make sure everyone's kind of playing along. One is we went from old normal to new normal for the past 14, 15 months, and now we're heading into a new normal. And what does that mean kind of as we go about our daily lives and do the things that we do to live, to work, to eat, etc. And then there are the ways we engage in spiritual community, and what does that mean? And kind of the evolution, the arc that the past, year and change has allowed us to travel. And then there is the, as we step into what I'll call the new normal, which is the coming out of hibernation and kind of moving through the world as, we individually and collectively find our new footing. And where am I standing as I kind of come out into the world in this kind of post-COVID scenario, if you will, and how do I thread the needle on all of those so that I can be navigating my day-to-day from a place of centeredness and conscious awareness, because I think the point you brought up, Gil, was so wonderful that it's so easy to fall back into old habits that we never really gave a lot of thought to. We just did things the way we did them because that's the way they'd always been done. And right. So there's now the opportunity to explore all of that more consciously as opposed to by default. And so if I kind of summarize what we've been talking about the past 20 minutes or so, I think those are kind of the key themes. Did I miss anything?
No. But I have another.
You have another what?
I have another thread.
Okay.
Because we're talking about the general us, which is an adult us, and like I'm thinking about the kids, because I think for younger people, let's say school age kids, through high school, it's gotta, I'm wondering really like what, it's hard to tell what the effects are because they have never been there. You know what I mean? They're just going forward into their life. So it's not like when I went to high school, we have an experience of whatever that was. And I just think it's interesting. I think it's going to be interesting to see the effects of what comes next, because there's been a lot of different ways of learning and being and experiencing that is their normal now on some level. I mean, when they look back at it, it's going to be when I was a kid, da, 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 da.
Right.
And what the experience of that is, because it feels like, at least in our house, I know that the social aspect of being with other kids was missed. I also think while it was a great benefit in some ways to be able to be together as a family for more time, was also a little trying at times, and there's times when everybody needed a break from a parent or a child or something like that. So I just think it's going to be interesting to see how they take that out into the world, and like what skills they didn't get in this developmental stage of whatever grade they're in. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Totally.
totally. So Carol is jumping in. She said she likes the tire metaphor and wants to talk about that some more.
Okay, Carol.
So I was, I was just thinking when I said that about how when we do come out of hibernation, when we do decide it's time to open up and look around, we can't look at it just the way we always have. We can't assume that the tires that we have are going to carry us the same way that they did before, because it's a whole different world. So whatever those tires are, whether that's your spiritual growth, whether it's your education, whatever, you got to look at it and go, well, where do I need to update this? What opportunity can I take now to step into something where maybe before it wasn't accepted in, like you said to me a little earlier, it's like, well, those things are like, oh, we just always did them that way. And part of that for me is, we always did them that way because we always did them that way, and because we couldn't. It was harder to buck the system, if you will, because everybody sort of believed that's what you needed to do. And I think the beauty of this is that we shook it all up, and now we can say, oh, well, what do I want? What tires would really work well for me now? And
what's going to support me on this next leg of my ride?
Right. And maybe I can afford to buy a little more expensive tires because it's really worth it now that I look at it, or maybe it doesn't matter. I don't need to have that. I can let that go altogether. It depends on where we are, but I think this time, has given us all an opportunity to reevaluate. And I think in some ways, I think kids will come out of this with a really, really unique experience and a really unique understanding of what it means to have to shift in a hurry. And I think for many families, this has been really overall a good experience in many ways. And I think for other families, it's just, if as people we don't choose to take advantage of what's coming our way, and instead we fight it, or we choose to kind of ignore it, then it just becomes something that allows all of that fear and confusion and stuff to be accentuated. And so I think there's probably some families that have really had a rough time, and kids who've had a really rough
a combination time. Right? There's because it's never like this.
Oh no.
And we're constantly, we've got the ups and the downs and the sideways momentum as well. And so I think one of the things that I'd love to have help folks walk away with after this show is, what are some things that we can do? What are some practices? What are some things that we can do to help us get back to center, to explore the new normal and not get sucked back into our previous routine by rote, as opposed to making conscious choices? And just wanted to throw that out there to both of you if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I absolutely want to get there as well. I want to say one more thing about the tire thing, because I want to just go a little deeper with that tire thing for you specifically, Carol. I think it's like when Gil found the tire that was new and in the box that he'd had for 6 years, and he really wanted it. He really wanted it to work. He really wanted to make it work. but no matter what, he couldn't, because it wasn't going to be right. It wasn't going to break. It wasn't going to be safe. It wasn't going to do what it was really supposed to do in his head. And so I think that it's a really good metaphor, um, for the things that we've discussed previously, just for life, when you want to make things work that don't,
Square peg, round hole.
Yeah.
And it's another way of saying that same thing, right? You want to force fit it of something that clearly is not going to work, but it would just be so much easier if it did.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a job or, a relationship or a family. If it, if it's your family and it's not working, you look around and you thank God for the friends you have and the pieces of it that do work, and you recreate on some level, so that it's healthy and so that it's sturdy and so that it's safe.
What came to my mind when we first did this was saying no. I think that's a really important piece of coming out of hibernation. It's saying to no to what isn't going to allow you to be who you need to be. I mean, if you say no to those things, really a more positive spin on that is to say yes to what you really need. Say yes to what will really allow you to show, hey, yes to what you can step into that place of being faithful, if you will, rather than fearful. And
that always sounds so easy when we talk about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's like, piece of cake.
It's subtle. I mean, I think, I was talking to somebody last night who was talking about, learning to say no, and she's really working on saying no, and she's really feeling good about it, But what it came down to is she's cutting things away that just, that aren't necessarily her genius, that are just adding too much stuff to her plate so that she doesn't really do anything well and all of that. And so this is a really good opportunity to evaluate those things. And, do I need to go to Starbucks 5 times a day to get a coffee? Do I need to spend the time? Do I need to spend the money? Do I, is that really what's going to serve me in this, in this thing, And obviously that was an exaggeration for most people.
But and it's so interesting because the analogy that came to my mind is, it's springtime, and at some point, during the spring and the summer, you need to prune, right? All of that growth, and you need to pare back, and you need to weed, and you need to, do all of the things necessary to cultivate your garden. And sometimes, as paradoxical as it sounds, sometimes in order for the tree to grow to its full potential, you need to prune it strategically. And that's, I think, another way of saying what you just said, right? Of what are the things, how can I pare back certain aspects of my life to allow the fullness of me to blossom?
So what we've had with COVID is a forest fire.
Yeah.
In our lives, in human existence. And it's burnt a whole bunch of stuff out. And the tendency is to just think, well, we need to make all that stuff come back. And the reality is we will do much better if we don't dive in that way.
Yeah.
I think. Because the forest grows because the fire does the pruning. And right? And
well, it
starts a few things.
Yeah, well, it creates fertilizer for the land. There are some tree seeds that only open after a fire, right? They can't open the heat. They need the heat to expand, otherwise they don't grow. And so, what are those areas in each of our lives that, coming out of the crucible that has been COVID, that are now ready to express in new ways.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And Carol said, absolutely. Pruning brings new life. You die to the old and hope springs.
Yep. Exactly. And
Hope
so
Springs. I've never been there. Oh, I'm sorry.
and so, it's interesting because one of the things I've been working with myself is, especially since Robin and I, when did we chat? Tuesday, Robin, we were kind of coming up with the idea for today's show. And since that conversation, one of the things that I've been working with is nothing can stop the perfection that is present. Right. And when I'm talking about the perfection that's present, I'm not talking about the world out there that looks however it looks, whether we label it good or bad or anything. There's, whatever labels humanly we decide to put on it, that perfection, that presence, that is present, that is presencing as you, me, everything in the world around us is the only capital R reality. And it's so easy to get sucked into the story of it all. I find myself getting sucked into a lot of stories, lately. And that has to be my go-to when I start to recognize what I'm doing and realize that I've been kind of sucked into the vacuum of whatever story has me spinning at the moment. And it's nothing can stop that perfection. Right. And that for me has become my shorthand to get back to that centered place that you were talking about earlier, Gil, of kind of knowing the truth and being able to stand in that place. And I like to use knowing over faith, but stand in that space of knowing what's real, what's truth. All that I know that I've learned through books and then later through life experience, that is the practicing the presence of God, as Joel Osteen called it, and among others, of how am I living that day to day. And that's what brings me back to center. And so in this moment, this week, that's what's working. And so just curious for either of you, do you guys have any things that you use to help bring you back to center when you've kind of gotten pulled into a story, or when you realize that you are exploring the world from fear as opposed to faith or knowing?
We're going to say something.
Go ahead.
Well, I wasn't really going to answer that question. What it made me think of, and maybe I will, but what it made me think of was, I mean, I was really contemplating what you were asking, and like, how do I get to the, reality of what's going on, or how do I, do I mean, because I feel like I always believe on some level that there's a pot of gold, and how do I keep on that path, kind of thing. But I was thinking, so much of the time, and I guess this is the answer to the question on some level, I don't think that we can do it just by reading, a self-help book, or by listening to our show, or by, talking to your favorite, guru. I think so much of it requires really going within, and I say that because I had this experience yesterday. I went to a craniosacral worker, and I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, I've heard craniosacral all my life, and oh, craniosacral, do this and do that. I was like, yeah, I need to do that. But there was something in me that told me I needed to do that. And it's been telling me that for years. And, so I went and as I'm laying on the table, not knowing what's going to happen, thinking I'm going to get she's going to massage my head. What came up for me was an experience from when I was 12 years old. And it's something that's been coming up a little bit over the past few months. Like it would pop into my head and I go, oh, that's so weird because I never really think about it. It's not a big deal, is my story. And there it was, right there on the table. And the bottom line to the story, and Gil doesn't even know this because I didn't talk about it. The bottom line to the story is I was sexually molested when I was 12 years old. What did somebody rape me or hurt me or any of that? No. But what happened was we went to the beach and we decided we'd hitchhike home. Really smart. And there were three of us, but I was with my cousin who was older and a boy, so it had to be okay. And whatever, I ended up in the front seat. I was in the middle of two guys, and they put their hand into my bathing suit underneath and put their fingers inside of me. Now, I didn't say anything because the man's wife and kids were in the back seat, and I didn't know what would happen if I said anything. And I kept telling myself, okay, well, he's not really doing anything. And so we got out of the car. I don't think I even told my best friend who was there. I don't think I told anybody ever. I mean, I've told the story, but I haven't told it like I was getting rid of it, letting it go, kind of telling the story. And so I say that story because I was thinking about it all day yesterday afterwards, thinking, wow, so am I really allowed to say that I was sexually molested? Because it doesn't feel like everybody's story. Like it doesn't feel that heavy because nothing really happened. But to my 12-year-old, something really happened. I was violated. And so I tell that story because I'm thinking, what's beyond what we need to do? What's beyond the just knowing the truth of what's out there? Like we need, there's parts of ourselves, and from the fire burning and all the analogies we've said and the COVID, like there's things being released and things being, coming forth and being brought up for healing, like Carol said.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say that to say it's also a journey of really being real sometimes with what comes up and what you hear and what, you may have that flash of an experience, or you may have some old story you're hanging on to that you've told yourself is no big deal, or you've made it a bigger deal than it is, or whatever. And that doesn't really matter. But what matters is that you acknowledge it and that what you do to it. Because when we say mind, body, spirit, I think a lot of times we forget about the body and how much the body really holds on to. Mm-hmm. So it's like, how do we release these things from our body? And so that would be my answer in the integration of all the things we talk about all the time. Really really listening to your body. And I think we heard that with Peter when we had Peter Bedard on as a guest. Yep. And he talked about how he healed his body from all kinds of trauma and car crashes and all major things, and really listening to our body as a living, functioning organism that's telling us what it needs and what it wants.
Yeah. And Cindy, also the show we had with Cindy, she also talked about that same thing using a different set of tools. And so that's a really great point. And thank you, Robin, for sharing that first. And for kind of giving us that peek into your own journey and experience. And it brought up for me the conversation we had with Paul Racy I don't know, some point last month. All the weeks are blurring together, so I can't remember exactly when it was, but I think it was about a month ago.
It doesn't matter. We pretty much cite Paul on every show.
I know. But what he talked about was that the importance of stillness. And for you, it was, you said that story had that memory had been kind of cropping up, and then you allowed yourself to pay attention to it, right? It might have taken a little while. And, you kind of put the pieces of that together, or that coming up, as well as what you'd been kind of intuiting about the cranial sacral and the whatever they do to your head. And that, through your intuition, being still and listening to your intuition and following it, you were able to explore that experience anew.
Right.
And we talk about stillness so much, and it's game changing when we actually allow that time for ourselves and think of it as a gift.
Yes.
And again, thank you, Robin, for sharing that. I think we have such a way of not really allowing ourselves to be with things. And I think this idea of the perfection that lies within, I think a big portion of us allowing that to be revealed and getting in touch with that is allowing ourselves to release all this stuff that's there, that when we go and we touch the presence, if you will, and we think, oh, but I'm not, because
Right.
This isn't for me, because because it's not about necessarily healing all those things. It's about allowing our true selves to come forth, almost in spite of what our life has been or looks like. It's that shift from, how do I fix it? How do I make it right? How do I change it? What do I do? To, oh, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really true? Whatever comes from that, is that true? Is this something I just need to be with and honor that I have feelings around it, and then allow that to go, instead of adding more story to it, if you will.
And I would call some of that story judgment, because there's the judgment of like, oh, I should be able to handle this, or I should have known better, or I mean, all those different judgments that come up around all the things, not just my situation, but even,
Right.
I mean, even as adults, we're like, I don't need to talk about this. It's not, I can figure it out. And sometimes you do just need to vomit it out. You just need to get it out. It's not that, you need to even hear advice. You just need to get rid of it.
Yeah. And give voice to whatever was keeping it stuck in some way, shape, or form. And we've talked about this on many shows before about, the spiritual bypass, because the judgment is often just a form of spiritual bypass, or, I shouldn't feel that way, or I should have known better, or, fill in the blank of the shoulda, woulda, coulda. And that's all just another form of spiritual bypass, instead of just being present with however it's showing up. Because getting back to your butterfly analogy, Gil, it's when we're holding the butterfly gently as opposed to trying to crush it. And when we're just being present with whatever's showing up, it's much, much easier to let it go and release it, than if we're trying to cram it into something. the way we
Right.
think it should look.
You know, what's coming up for me is an exercise that Gil and I sometimes do in workshops with people, and we would have people talk, you know, write down their top 3 dreams or whatever, and then you know, why they weren't doing them, why they weren't happening. And then we would have them go around the room and walk around and introduce themselves to people and tell them why. So, for example, I might go up and say, "Hi, I'm Robin. I'm not writing my book because I don't have enough time, and I don't know. People know more than I do, and because what am I gonna do? Nobody wants to read whatever." But they'd introduce themselves, and after like they'd introduce themselves by the 3rd time, they were laughing, and they were like, it totally lost its power.
Yeah.
Because it's not the truth, you know.
Right.
It's so it's like letting it out and getting rid of its power is so important.
The phrase that came to mind is giving voice to the ridiculosity of it all.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think sometimes we talk about, you know, we're going to we need to deal with this so that we can heal, and so that we can be whoever we are, and we can, you know, and the reality is perhaps that we just need to allow the space for us, for the real us to show up. It's not about it's not about healing yourself. It's about allowing your healed self to come out.
Yes, 100%. Because we so often, and this was me totally, you know, 20, 25 years ago, as I was kind of kickstarting my own spiritual journey, I was like, if I just got rid of all this stuff that's got me way down, you know, and like that, I'm purposefully doing that kind of crazy voice because it's like heavy and hard, and you know, ugh. but I got to do all this hard work to get rid of it, and only when I get rid of it will I be able to sit back and relax. And that really hurt my voice doing that, so I'm never going to do that again. but
Note to self.
Yeah, but like it's like so much hard work to let my real self shine forth, right? And that for me was a story for many years of I've got to do this, and I've got to meditate daily, and meditation's got to look this way, and I've got to do, you know, treatments, or I've got to do X, Y, and Z, and only when I'm doing these 17 things to perfection will my true self be able to emerge.
And the reality is those 17 things became the reasons why you couldn't access your true self.
Exactly. Exactly. And you know, I'm trying to think of telling my, you know, I won't give away my age, but my T-minus 25-year-old self that, and I don't know that I would have believed it, you know, back in the day, because it can't be that easy, right? That would have been my ridiculous story that I'm giving voice to. And so
it can't be that easy.
It's not easy. That's not easy.
Leaping.
It's simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's simple in theory, but I mean, you know, it's like leaping, thinking that the net will appear is not simple, you know.
But I'm just going back to your story, right? Like you said by the 3rd time, you know, people would tell their story of why they weren't doing whatever their dream was, and giving voice to that, you know, they had the realization of how ridiculous it was, of, you know, how it sounded. They were laughing the 3rd time they tried to do it, and or sort of made that introduction of themselves to whomever, you know, was in the workshop with them. And sometimes it can't be that easy. It might take the hard part is figuring out I can't because, right? And it's the everything on the other side of that because, that it's sometimes hard to figure that bit out of what exactly is the story I'm telling myself.
Right. And Carol says her daughter tells her that the voices are distracts.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. And they
that we
are.
do to ourselves.
And
Yeah,
yeah, and so yeah, you have to know what voice to listen to.
yeah. And so, and sometimes when we try to shove those distracting voices back in whatever closet they crept out of, they get louder,
Hmm.
right? And so sometimes it's listening to those distractions and then knowing the truth about them,
Yeah.
right? There's no one size fits all um that will always work 100% of the time. I wish there was a formula.
Right. And those little gremlins, sometimes they're super cute. And you
I know,
go,
remember the movie Before
okay,
They Got the Water?
right? So I
Oh,
think there's so many answers to the question, but I think the most important thing is um to be still and be safe, and figure out what it is you need, even if you don't know what that is. If you feel like you need to to somebody talk to somebody, whether it's a therapist or a practitioner or a spiritual person or a coach or a friend. It doesn't matter, but let it out. Or if it's a journal, there's just you'll find your way. But all of the things that we've said are good, and you probably even have more things that you could tell us. So if
Yeah,
that's true, after you've watched this, make sure to post it for us so we can talk about it.
absolutely. And so, Carol, I can so totally relate, because for me, I'm 100% the same. The doing is the distraction. That, if I'm busy, it kind of placates the voice, or at least I can't hear it. It either placates the voice, or I'm so busy I can't give any attention to it. Um, and sometimes doing is so much easier than being. Sometimes.
Well, and then there's the flip side to that, though. If there's depression, then you're just laying there splayed out and being, so to speak, and all you can hear are the voices, and you
Yes,
can't do anything.
that's why the one size fits all. There's no such thing.
I want,
So,
I want a couple of those shirts once.
Okay, Shecky, back in your cage. He's a wannabe comedian. Okay.
so, as you navigate the new normal, pay attention to what's coming up. Pay attention to the voices, the stories, the fears, um, and see what are they trying to tell you. And for each one of those, it's going to be something completely different. And what are the things that you want to carry forward with you out of this post hibernation experience, or into this post hibernation experience, and what do you want to leave back in the cave?
Yeah.
um, that's been, not because it's being ignored, but because you've consciously made a decision that it's not serving you, or that it's something that might have served you at one point, but is no longer something you want to carry in your backpack with you for the rest of your journey. And I think it's the kind of synthesizing the conversation. It's the, what are we consciously, being conscious, being present, and acknowledging all of the stuff that's contributed to our being exactly where we are now, and then consciously deciding how we move forward, rather than being dragged along into some future that somebody else has planned for us, or society has planned for us, or because that's the way we used to do things pre-COVID. And really just being aware of, why am I saying yes to the things I'm saying yes to?
Yeah. And I would just say, too, remember, we've never been here before. we as a collective, I mean, we're coming out of a time that pretty much no living person has really experienced. And while there are experts and people that will tell you do this, do that, or it'll be better if you do that, you may need something else.
Yeah,
So
because the experts have never lived through this either.
they've
We're
just
all making it up.
right? They've just declared themselves experts. So you listen to what your body and your heart and your mind says to listen to, and watch where the messages come from, because they may come from some relative that's passed on. You may have a dream, you may whatever. Who knows, but it may be just the message you need to take one more step forward.
Yeah.
So just pay attention and let us know. Let us know how it goes and what works. And come back next week and tell us when we will be talking about something else that will be super fun.
Obviously.
That's what we do.
Obviously.
Thank
All
you
right.
so
With
much,
that, thanks,
Olmstead.
Rev Gil, for joining us. It's always fun
Thank
to have you
you.
on. And thank you, Robin. And we will see you all back here next week. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Lots of love. Bye.